I want to open up our text today from the book of Acts. I want to open up our text from the book of Acts, and I want to read this passage as a lament. And here's the thing, is that this is normally not where you would turn to for a lament. You don't turn to the book of Acts. That's crazy. But I want to read the book of Acts as a lament. I want to read it as a prayer. I want to read it as a supplication and petition unto God. And it says these words. It says, when the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, Acts chapter 7, verse 54 through 60. And it says this, it says, when the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. What are they hearing? They're hearing the words of Stephen. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. And at this they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him, to kill him, to execute him. And meanwhile, the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of the young man named Saul. You know who Saul is? And while they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Let's go on and move now to Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 8. Acts chapter 9, verse 1 through 8. And it says, now Saul, who was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciple, he went to the high priest. Let's keep going. And asked for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, that word is also movement. You need to know that that word is also movement. For any of those who belong to the way, to the movement, whether men or women, might be, you went a little too fast for me. That was, oh, I'm gone. There it is. Yep. There, yep, whether, whether men, E flat, or women, might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And as he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell on the ground and heard the voice say to him, Saul, 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 why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And the man traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound but did not see anyone. And Saul got up from the ground. When he opened his eyes, he could not see nothing. He couldn't see nothing. So they led him by hand into Damascus. You see, I hold this as a prayer because my prayer is that in the year of 2016, that white supremacy will come to a realization where this demonic force has a Saul-like experience. I pray, Jesus, that the demonic forces of white supremacy, racialized police brutality and violence might have a Saul awakening where they encounter God and all of a sudden they don't see the same way. This is my prayer. This is my lament. This is what I ask of Jesus. God, allow people to see me the way that you see me. In the book of Genesis, when you said, you're good. You're good. You're good. You're sinful, but you're good. You're sinful, but you're good. You may have your seats. You're sinful, but you're good. You don't got it together. You don't got it figured out. You don't know everything in life. You haven't done it. But hey, I see your humanity. I see your value. I see your prominence. I hear your voice. I know you got kids. I know you take them to school. I know you walk them to the bus. I know you buy them new shoes. I know you take care of them. I know you're just trying to make it. I know you got a side job selling cigarettes, and I know that, but you're good. But you're good. I know you got a side hustle, kind of like illegally selling CDs. I know you're sinful, but you're good. And this is my prayer, that people will be able to see, and what I mean by people, I mean by white people. I mean by whiteness. I'm talking about whiteness as a structure. Now you need to know that whiteness is a structure. And when I'm talking about whiteness, I'm not only talking about white people, because in reality, there are black folks and Asian folks and Native American folks that are all still entrapped in whiteness. It is this colorized bias. Look at my humanity and see my good. This is my prayer, that white supremacy will actually do what Paul did and fall off its high horse. And I pray that it would ask the same question. Who are you? Or we can look into the identity of us and we can respond, it is me. It is me. It is your brother. It is your sun-kissed kin. It's me. You see, this past week, as we conclude one of the most difficult weeks, that has a familiar haze. I find myself in great grief. I find myself in great turmoil, anger. You, like me, you woke up to the execution of Alton Sterling on Monday, only to turn around and wake up the next day to the death of Philando Castile. And then all day Wednesday, you experienced the hushed silence of your coworkers as you were in the office, still pushing the same emails, still cracking the same jokes, still moving on as though nothing has happened. And if you were like me, there was a kind of sting left in your eyes where you knew that at any given moment you would break down and cry, but yet you still had to function in the dysfunction. I found myself in the restroom every now and then, batting my eyes, thinking about the sons that I don't have, thinking about the daughters that I yet don't know. And I sat there, gazing upon my brown skin and my brown eyes and my chiseled jaw and my big buff muscles. In the mirror. And I was saying, why don't they see me the way I see me? I'm good. You good? I'm good. And I found myself stuck. It was the longest work day. Now, you all know this. I work at a high school. I'm a chaplain. In summer, we get shorter hours. How in the world did that Wednesday feel like one of the longest days? But it did. And then, if you're like me, someone came up to you maybe at the end of the day, just because they wanted to get it in while you were still there. And they asked you the question, how you doing? Is that anybody? Right at the end of the day, right before you're about to clock off, right before you're about to leave, right? And they asked you, how are you doing? And then for a split moment, you were thinking, oh man, thank you. Oh man, you're good, you care, okay. And then as you begin to say how you feel, they ask you another question. And you said, oh, okay, all right, okay, fine. No, I'll just go, yeah, I'll answer that question too. Okay, yeah, and I think, and then as you started to talk, they asked you another question. And then you started to guess a little bit. He said, you know what, they don't really care. They don't really want to know how I feel. I'm trying to tell them the fullness, the depth, all the circumference, the radius, the perimeter, all of the periphery of my emotionality, but yet you only have a list of questions you're trying to get through. And then, if you're like me, a piece of you almost came out of your Jesus. And you almost said, you know what, I still got bills. 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 Okay, what's today? Okay, today's the 3rd. Okay, dang, that I just got paid. Okay. Then you pulled yourself together. And he said, oh, well, you know what? I'm sorry, but I really have to go. Then you went home. If you're like me, the next thing that you did is then you called your family. You called your friends. You called your distance fellas you haven't seen in a while. You called your ladies, your girlfriends you haven't talked to in a while. And you didn't even have to say what you were calling about. And they asked you the simple question of, how are you doing? And then all of a sudden, you really knew in this moment that you could be authentic, that you could say, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. And then they said, tell me more. And then you started having deeper conversations. And then if you call that one friend that I got, the one that's kind of, you know that friend. My friend is the crazy one, right? Y'all know, you already knew where I was going. My friend, his name's JL. I called JL. JL, he's an anarchist. JL don't care about nobody and nothing. He don't care. He'd be like, we don't even know what we need to, God, on everything, God, right, JL. I called JL. He said, on everything, I called JL because I knew I could be real with JL. I didn't have to be Reverend Derik Harris. I didn't have to be Chaplain Derik Harris. Yes, I did just C-walk all up this stage. Yes, I did. I did that. It's hitting me now. It's hitting me now that I just did that. I'm crazy. But I called JL because I know that I could have deeper conversations with Jay. And I began to have more conversations with Jay. And what we did in that moment is we kind of just lived through the week. We talked about the little 14-year-old girl. The little 4-year-old girl. Do you guys remember? I don't even have to tell you what I'm about to tell you because you already know. That's what grief does. When she can say, it's okay, mommy. When she can say, it's okay, mommy, I'm here with you, that's a problem. When a 4-year-old has to have the strength of a man, that's a problem. When a little child has to be stronger than her mother, that's a problem. When a little baby girl can see death happen in her eyes and she can say, that's okay. I'm here with you. That's a problem. And if you're not angry in that, then you know what else is a problem. If that doesn't make your skin boil, then you know what else is a problem. If that doesn't cause you to get emotional, for tears to run down your face, that is a problem. And it makes me beg the question that is ever so present: how many sun-kissed creations have she seen, slain like the paint of Picasso on a paintbrush, on her television screen, on a Twitter feed, on a Snapchat, or on a video that makes her come to the conclusion that she can say that's okay? How many has she seen? To the point where she becomes desensitized, where she can say, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. I've seen this happen before. I've seen it done before. That is, that's a problem. Then I was talking with JL, and we began to have further dialogue and further conversation. JL said, well, violence begat violence. And I said, all right, Jay, okay, let's just get on. Okay, right. But then we began to talk about the 15-year-old boy who on national television breaks down and he cries. And do you remember what he says? I want my daddy. He doesn't say it once. He says it as though it's wishful thinking, as though he's praying it into the air, as though that by him saying it over again, his father would materialize in front of him. I want my daddy. I want my daddy. I want my daddy. And as he falls into the cushioned shoulders of his loved ones, they take him away. But I appreciate his loved ones in that moment because they don't allow him to escape the periphery of the television screen. They keep him close enough so that we have to deal with the tension, that we have to face what evil looks like, that we have to face the aftermath of police brutality and racialized state-sanctioned violence, that we have to face it, and that it begs a question from us, not the question of how many, but now the question of what are you going to do? And in this conference, the question becomes for us, is how are we going to shift? How are we going to transition? How are we going to rally and corral and organize and systematize and force people to see that black bodies, when they're not commodities, are not oddities? That's what it is too much. A black body is a commodity. And when it's not a commodity, it's a problematized oddity. They take the culture, but they won't take Calvin. They'll take the hips, but they won't take Tracy. They'll give us boxer braids, but won't know nothing about cornrows. They'll talk about black on black crime, But they won't know the statistics of white on white crime is the exact same thing all around. Same on Asian crime, same on Native American, Native crime. It's the same on Korean against Korean American crime. It's the same. It's the same. It's the exact same. It's the same. People associate with their communities. That 15-year-old boy, at a time when he should be thinking about two-a-day practices, about a time when he should be thinking about who he's going to take on to homecoming, about a time when he should be working and worrying on what he's going to wear for his back-to-school first day. About a time when he should be bothering his mom for some new Jordans and she's going to say, you better take your Jordans butt and go and do something else with that. I'm not buying you no Jordans. I didn't have no Jordans. Daddy didn't have no. That was a flashback. Sorry. That was all the way back. But he should not be worrying, but he should not be having to have the same conversation of adults. I want my daddy. I want my daddy. And when I heard those words, I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout. And when I think about Alton Sterling's murder being looped over and over and over again, tens of millions of times, over and over, throughout this nation, throughout this world, over and over again, my mind could do nothing but go back to the times of lynching. Because during those times, what would happen is that during a lynching, you would keep a souvenir. You would take a finger. You would take a charred piece of flesh. You would grab a piece of clothing. You would put it inside of a photo album. You would pull the photo album out on Thanksgiving, and Christmas, Easter dinner, and you would share with everybody, your friends around you. And you would share with them, and they would see it, and then they would like it. You see where I'm going with this? You would share with them, and they would like it. And you would share with them, and they would like it. And you would share with them, and they would like it. And my mind goes back to a time where we have moved as a society. No, we don't keep lynching souvenirs in the scrapbooks. Now we just share them with each other on Facebook. Now we just share them with each other on Twitter. Now we just share them over and over again. Now, even as you look on your timeline, you have no option. You have no choice because the video starts playing before you can even scroll past it. I remember that Monday when Alton Sterling died. I was laying in bed, and I had just gotten to the point where I was able to fall asleep. And like many of you, what do we do right before we go to bed? We check our Facebook. We check our Instagram. I know it's a bad habit. I know. I mean, I read my Bible. You know. Where's that button at? There. You know. And I've stumbled across the 22nd Psalms, and I didn't read my Bible. But I remember when I scrolled past the feed, and it just started going, and my mouth dropped. And I knew that in that moment, it was going to be a long night. Is that any of your stories? And then something else happened Wednesday morning. I woke up, tears in my eyes. I woke up with a sore throat. I woke up with a huge headache. And that's what grief does. It's with you when you fall asleep, And it's with you when you wake early in the morning. And it's with you at times when you don't even know it. It's like goodness and mercy. It follows you all the days of your life. And the question now becomes, what do we as a people, what do we as a nation, what do we as a community, what do we as a collective, what do we do with this? What do we do with this grief? How do we manage? How do we continue on? How do we press? How do we get to our next step? Well, I think one of the first things that we have to do is that we got to learn how to feel and feel deeply. I don't apologize for these tears that run down my face because I'm a human. My responsibility is to be human. God's responsibility is to be God. One of the things that needs to happen is I need to fully embrace, feel, and feel wholeheartedly. Feel the weightiness of the situation and allow it to take me through. One of the things about emotions is that they demand a name. And so I say today that I am sad. I say today that I feel depressed. I say today that I'm having a hard time. I say today, no, I'm not doing good. I'm just okay. Someone asked me that on Friday. They asked me, how are you doing? I said, I'm okay. And I want you to know that I'm just okay. Just okay. And I look to the biblical text, and I look to the story of Exodus, and it starts horribly, actually. You have a group of people that are enslaved in Egypt. The Pharaoh at the time decides to put more strain, more stress on the people to keep them busy, to take captive of their ability to freely be and become, so that they just become mundane, walking zombies, flesh with pulse, but yet no vitality. And he gives them he even makes the work harder. He takes away supplies, and he takes away things that will make his kingdom better. He takes away because the purpose is not about building a kingdom, but it's about suppressing a people. And then what we see in that story, what happens around the 24th or so verse, is that then there's this little gateway, the 24th or the 23rd verse, there's this little gateway that kind of takes shape. 23rd verse in Exodus chapter 2, and it says, and during that long period, the king of Egypt died. And the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. And I want you to listen to that. Here we are, these people that are depressed, experiencing oppression and suppression again, and repression on repression on repression. And what happens is that they fully embrace their humanity. Watch this. You need to get this. They fully embrace their humanity, and what happens next is that their tears went up to God. I want you to know, I think you missed it. They didn't cry out and say, God, help me. They didn't cry out and say, God, where are you? They didn't cry out and say, God, can you come by my way? They just felt. And they felt wholeheartedly that eventually their tears went up to God. And I want you to watch what happens next. Then the Bible says, and then God heard their groaning. Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it. And it says, and then God remembered. And then God remembered. Now, anytime you look at the biblical text, anytime you see those words, God remembered, the next thing that we encounter is action. Anytime, everywhere that it appears inside of the Bible, anytime we get to a part where it says, and God remembered, the very next thing that we see is that God takes an action. And so I want to ask, and so I want to challenge you today, my dear brothers and sisters, my friend and my good people, is that we got to cry. We got to cry for one another. Cry inconsolable tears for God's children. Let us respond with our full emotionality for all of our brothers and sisters. Let us cry for our brothers and sisters in Charleston, South Carolina. Let us cry for Cleveland, Ohio. Let us cry for New York. Let's cry for Minnesota. Let's cry for Baton Rouge. Let's cry out for our heroes and our sheroes on the front line organizing against injustice. Let's cry against poorly funded classrooms in intercity rural communities across the U.S. Let's cry out for our family members and neighbors that are falling victim to the CIA infestation of crack cocaine in our communities. Let us cry out, because we know that when we do that, God responds. Let's cry boisterous tears. Let's cry out. And after we get done crying for a little bit, oh, you better commit. Commit. Commit to black businesses. Commit to knowing your council members. Commit to voting. Commit to community organizing. Commit to showing up at the rally. Commit to showing up at the protest. Commit to speaking truth on the job. Commit to having courageous conversations. Commit. Commit. And I want to give you this thing too, is that when we cry out, God remembers. And the reason why God remembers is because he hasn't forgotten. Now, I know this statement appears a little bit redundant. It's an overstatement. However, but I want you to hear me. You see, whenever we encounter the words God remembers, God acts. We see this in Genesis chapter 8 and verse 1, where it states, God remembered Noah and all of the wild animals, all of the domestic animals that were with him in the ark, and God made the wind blow over the earth and the waters subsided. When God remembers, God moves. We see this in Genesis chapter 30 and verse 22. It says, then God remembered Rachel, and he listened to her, enabled her to conceive. When God remembers, God moves. We see this again in Numbers chapter 10 and verse 8, and it says, when you arrive in your own land and you go to war against your enemies who attack you, sound the alarm with the trumpets. Then the Lord your God will remember you and rescue you from your enemies. When God remembers, God moves. And the way that God remembers is we just engage in our full emotionality. Cry with one another. Cry with one another. Cry louder. Cry boisterous tears. No more silent prayers. Cry with the fullness of yourself. And here we are at Exodus 2 and 24. And God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And my dear friends, I want you to hang on to this. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to take for them to recognize our humanity. I don't know how long it's going to take for them to see that we are essentially all human. That for them to see that my blood is red just like your blood is red. I don't know how long it's going to take them to see that I have two eyes, or some of us only have one. That's okay too. Right? I don't know how long it's going to take for them to see our humanity. But this is what I do know. This is what I do know, and that is that delays do not change our destination. That delays do not change our promises with God. They don't change. You know, I don't know if you've ever been on an airplane. Maybe. I went on an airplane. I've been on one. I'm joking. No, but I have been on an airplane. That was kind of a joke. It fell flat. But sometimes what happens when you're flying, right, you experience these delays. And I don't know if you've ever been in a moment in your life where you were heading to one destination, where you're heading to your vacation, and you see that things are not moving along as you would like them. I don't know anybody that just simply stops and packs up and goes home. I don't know anybody that is stuck in traffic and you're heading to one direction and you see that things begin to slow down and things begin to not move as fastly as you want. I don't know anybody that just simply says, all right, at this point, it's over, and just simply turns around. You've got to be committed. You've got to stay committed to the cause. You got to shift your mentality. You got to change your mind. You got to be able to say, yet I will keep going. Yet I will keep trusting. Yet I will keep believing. I know I've been at this protest. I know I've been at this march. I know I signed this initiative. I know that I called the councilman 17 times in the last 17 seconds. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep being committed. I'm going to stay on the path. I'm going to stay on the track, because the reality is that you need to be afraid if you don't. You need to be afraid if you don't. Not afraid just in your own right, but afraid of what they might do if you stop. You see, you got to look at this too. That in Dallas, that the shooter, so we're told, Micah Xavier Johnson, was executed by a robot. That's scary. You need to really look at that. Mark my words when I say this, that there may become a time where they won't bring police officers to your front doors. There may become a time where it won't be a police officer in flesh pulling you over. There may come a time where they're going to just have a flip of the switch. We've seen in Dallas where police officers have become the jury, the judge, and the executioner. That's a problem. And we have to respond. Now, I want you to also hear this too, that when we look at Dallas, we must know that that's terrorism. It's nothing else but domestic terrorism. I'm going to say it again. It is domestic terrorism. Evil. In Minnesota was terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Evil. In Baton Rouge was terrorism. Domestic terrorism and evil. We can't look at these three events in this 1 week as though they are opposites on different sides, as though they're different dichotomies. They are a continuum of the same cloth, and that cloth is white supremacy. That cloth is demonic, racialized police brutality. That same continuum, that cloth is marginalization, subjugation, disenfranchisement. If you wanted to go to the happier service, just get the CD. The first service was nice. It was fun. It was good. Get the CD. And as I come to a close, E flat. I used to know this lady, true story, I used to know this lady that she would read the Bible and she would have these glasses. And when she would read, she would go like this and then go like this. And I said, now you're a liar, because you don't need those glasses, right? But I want to leave you with this. And that is that James Baldwin, in his work, Notes of a Native Son, he said this. He says, I love America. I love America more than any other country in the world. And it is exactly for this reason that I insist on my right to criticize her perpetually. He says, I love America. I love Lady Liberty. I love freedom of assembly. I love freedom of speech. But it's for this love that I criticize her perpetually. And like Baldwin, I want to let you know that I love these 50 nifty United States from 13 original colonies. shout them, scout them, tell all about them. Y'all know the song, don't look at me like you don't know that song. One by one till you give them a name. I love Our Lady. I love our assembly. I love this country. And some of y'all are like, Derick, I thought you were radical. I thought you were a little bit crazy. You're saying a whole lot of stuff. Well, I want to tell you why I love it. Because my ancestors built this. My ancestors built all of this. All of this. All of this. This is mine. I love this because my ancestors built this. Black bodies carried it on their back. Black bodies, brown bodies carried its labor force in their womb. Black bodies did this. And it is in the spirit of James Baldwin and in the spirit of love of my country that I criticize her deeply. And I grieve with many Americans as we've experienced this week. And it is a familiar bite of grief. It is a familiar heart thread of sorrow. It is a familiar sting of terrorism. It is a familiar a stench of smell. It is a familiar weight on my shoulders. It is a familiar, and you know why it's familiar? It is a familiar grief because this kind of grief, this grief that we're feeling is the same kind of grief that Dr. Eddie Glaude talks about in his book, Democracy in Black. He says, well, Derick, there's a value gap. And I don't know if you heard about the educational gap. I know you heard about the achievement gap. I know you heard about the wealth gap. But the value gap is the most simplest gap out of all of them. And that gap is that for some reason, white folks have more privilege and have more worth than people of color. Now, I don't know how it got here. And they said, wait. Actually, I do know how it got here. This grief that I'm feeling comes from a long lineage of white supremacy. It's a lineage that has been around that is as American as apple pie. It started in 1790 that allowed white persons to attain citizenship. And we know that the same racialized practices of citizenship still continues and rather had continued all the way until 1954. We know where this grief comes from. We know where it comes from. It comes from the many lives who were lost during the brutal end of slavery, a war where people realized and had millions where whites would rather face death than black freedom. You know where this grief comes from. This grief comes from the form of backlash during the Reconstruction era. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from the party realignment in the New Deal. It came from the new Jim Crow era when it took over the South. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from CIA planning cocaine in poor communities. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from the war on drugs. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from mass incarceration. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from police brutality. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from, high education costs and low care about the poor folks. You know where this grief comes from. It comes from that American pie dream. That American pie dream that says people of color don't have the same privileges as everybody else. It is my duty. It is my duty, my moral obligation to flip that thing around. It is my moral obligation to stand up and to speak truth to power. It is my moral obligation to disturb the comfortable. It is my moral obligation to preach Jesus in justice. It is my moral obligation to look at my fellow brothers and sisters and says, you're good. It is my moral obligation to look at food deserts in our community and say, no, we need a grocery store right here. We need one right here. It is my moral obligation to stand up and to speak out. It is my moral obligation to talk about shift, but then be about shift. There was an F in there. There was an F. There was an F. I had an F in there. There was an F. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And God, I pray that you would help us to be about it. I pray that you would help us to be about it, to be about your business, to be about your business. I pray these things, Lord, in the name of Jesus, that you would wake us up from this lulled sleep, that you would remove us from this thick fog of what Dr. Glaude calls unreality, that you would open our eyes that we might see the value gap, and that you would help us to close it the way that you have made it, in the way that you intended it from the very, very beginning. And God, I want to be clear and tell you this, that I'm not asking for equality. Lord, I'm asking for freedom. I'm not asking for equality. I'm asking for equity. I pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.